Hello my fellow horror fanatics, and welcome back to October Horror Fest. As I revealed in yesterday's October Horror Fest, today I will be reviewing I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. Following the success of I Know What You Did Last Summer, the sequel was put into production pretty quickly. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer was made on an increased budget of $24 million and was released on November 13th, 1998, and managed to make a decent $84 million. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer takes place 1 year later after the events of the first film. Julie is still struggling from what happened, and is having nightmares and is constantly on edge thinking the killer will come back. I wonder if she has a sixth sense. Ray shows up and asks Julie to come back home, but she says she's just not ready, and he has to work so he goes back home, and he kind of acts like a jerk, thinking only about himself. Julie's friend Carla, out of nowhere, gets a phone call from a radio station telling her about a 4th of July weekend getaway to the Bahamas contest, and all she needs to do is name the capital of Brazil, and she answers Rio de Janeiro, and the radio host says that's the correct answer, except there's a problem. The capital of Brazil is actually Brasilia, so something is definitely wrong. Julie calls Ray and tries to get him to come with her and her friends on the trip, but he acts like an idiot and says he's not sure if he can make it, but he'll try. Ray, after getting a talking to from his friend on how he's being an idiot, comes to his senses and he decides to go on the trip, but instead of calling Julie, which is what he should have done, he takes his friend's advice and him and his buddy drive up to surprise her, and on the way they find a car in the middle of the road and what looks like a body on the ground, and instead of just taking off and going to find a phone to report it, which is what I would have done, Ray goes out to check the body and discovers it's a freaking dummy, and the whole thing's a trap, and Ben Willis appears out of nowhere and kills Ray's friend, then tries to run Ray over with his truck, and almost succeeds, but Ray leaps over a guardrail and goes tumbling down a hill and gets knocked out cold. The next day, Julie, thinking Ray decided not to come, agrees to let her friend Will, who her roommate keeps trying to push on her, to come along. The group arrives in the Bahamas, and when they get there, they're told it's storm season, meaning there's going to be rough weather for the weekend, and there's going to be very few guests, and a small amount of staff. I admit, this is too convenient a plot point, and it creates the perfect setup for what's obviously going to happen. While they're partying, poor Ray, who's in an ICU at a hospital, wakes up and makes a Hollywood-style exit. Back on the island, Ben Willis starts killing off both staff and guests, and eventually the group discovers Ben Willis' handiwork. The killer made it impossible for the group to leave by trapping them on the island, and from this point on it becomes a battle for survival. That night, one of the only surviving hotel staff takes the kids to a small cemetery on the island and tells them the backstory of the killer Ben Willis, and how he used to work at the hotel, and that he had murdered his wife and took his kids and vanished. I admit, I wasn't surprised by this revelation, but I like the revelation of the backstory because it makes the killer more sinister than we already knew he was. Julie finds a freshly dug grave, and spray painted in red on the tombstone is Julie's name and the day she dies, which happens to be that day, and I admit it's freaking creepy, really showing how sinister Ben Willis really is. After Julie has a similar screw this moment, like in the original film, the group makes the atypical mistake of splitting up, and everyone starts getting killed off one by one, leading to a final showdown at the gravesite, where it's revealed that Julie's friend Will is actually Ben Willis' son, and he was the one who lured them to the island. And then Killer Daddy shows up, and just when it looks like Julie's a goner, Ray suddenly shows up and tries to save the day, but things suddenly go wrong, and there's a massive fight, and in the struggle Ben Willis accidentally kills his own son. Well, that's what you get by having your own son help you in your murderous plot. Willis, freaking out, goes to try and kill Ray when Julie suddenly shoots him multiple times, telling him to just freaking die. And Jennifer Love Hewitt's performance here is top notch. Ben Willis falls into the open grave and seems to die, and the next day, Ray, Julie, and her friend Carla, who managed to survive somehow, are all rescued. Sometime later, Julie and Ray have purchased a house and seem to be having a normal life, but that night, Julie is in bed when she's suddenly attacked by Ben Willis, who is under her damn bed, and it looks like she's killed off, and that's the end. But the truth is, guys, pretty much everyone agrees this is just another nightmare sequence, like what was used at the end of the first film. Okay, so what do I think of I Still Know What You Did Last Summer? Honestly, I think it's actually pretty good. The sequel seems to get a lot of crap And while I can agree there are some justifications for it, I don't think it's a bad sequel. The plot of the film, I admit, is pretty obvious and predictable, from how the groups lured to the island, and how it's right when storm season starts, meaning the place will be pretty much empty, leaving the kids alone and vulnerable. But that being said, I still think the film works. I admit the tension and suspense from the first film was not as effectively used here as in the original, and the film does make more use of gore and ups the body count, but there is still plenty of frightening scenes and some suspenseful, terrorizing moments, but I really wish there were more of them. The acting is pretty solid and it's a tough call, but Jennifer Love Hewitt might have actually topped her performance here over the original film, and that's not easy to do, and it really shows how good an actress she is. I like the backstory revelations of Ben Willis because it not only provides a purpose for the location of the movie, but makes an already frightening killer more frightening, and that's always a good thing. The film's writer Trey Calloway, I feel, really tried to make a solid follow-up to I Know What You Did Last Summer, but I really wish Kevin Williamson could have been available to rewrite some of his script, because I feel based on how good Scream 2 turned out, he could have been able to take Calloway's script and improve on it enough to get the same success for I Still Know What You Did Last Summer that he had with Scream 2. In the end, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer is a good sequel, but I admit it's not as good as it could have been, but it's still a film I highly recommend you guys check out. A third installment in the series was planned, having the surviving characters returning, but unfortunately it was cancelled, and instead a standalone sequel called I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer went straight to DVD and features none of the original cast. I won't be covering the third installment right now, but I'll get to it at a future date. Tune in tomorrow when I review another horror film for October Horror Fest. I will talk to you guys later. This is the Entertainment Wizard, signing off.